And Miss Sue, we're so glad you're here.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
So glad. Would you come up here a second? Would you mind? Can I put you on the spot?
No.
As she runs forward. We love Sue.
I love Transformation House.
We can tell. Like the shirt. Sue came through last weekend, and Judy and I got to have dinner with her upstairs at Smoke on the Water, and she was headed to the beach for vacation this week, and so she came back in time to be here for worship this morning. We're so glad. Can you tell me why you love Transformation House?
Why do I love Transformation House? Because you love Jesus, and so do I, so does Quest.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is exactly what we've done. And yeah, I love Transformation House. I love the people in Transformation House.
Sue is a part of Quest Community Church in Lexington, Kentucky, where we go for the Uprising Conference every April.
Yeah.
We have for the last, they've had it 3 times, and we've been, Chris and I got to go the very first year, and then we took more people with us last year, and then this year, this past April, Sue made it possible for us to take even more people with us, and she helped us even get there, and we really appreciate that. And so next April, mark your calendars, next April, it's just a 2-day trip. It's not going to take a lot of your time, and you're going to get so much out of it, because when Chris and I went to the very first Uprising, was before we had started Transformation House. We went there, we saw what Pastor Pete was doing at that, and not just Pastor Pete, but everybody in the church. You know what it's like because you experience it here to a small degree of what they do. But the way they love people, the way they love Jesus, and the way they connect the two, Chris and I decided this is the way we want Transformation House to be. So we're so glad to be connected with Quest Community Church, and especially with Sue. Because she's just a sweetheart, and we love, you know, if you're not her friend on Facebook, you might as well just go ahead and look her up. Go ahead and get your phone out now, Sue Hatton, and send her a friend request, and she'll accept. And she's got friends all over the world because that's the kind of person she is. She likes to travel, and she likes to make friends, and she likes to tell people about Jesus. And I'm just so proud that she gets to wear a Transformation House shirt to Quest Community Church next Sunday. Saturday, yeah. How many services do they have on
They have 3. They have 2 on Sunday. They have one on Saturday night at 5:55, Sunday morning at 9:30 and 11:30.
So the Saturday night one you can watch live, streaming online. You can't watch the Sunday ones because you're going to be here.
No.
But you can watch the Saturday night one streaming, or you can go back and watch their services. They're awesome. Their worship team is great. Everything about the church, we just love it, and we're trying to build right here. We're part of the Uprising.
Yes.
Anybody wearing? Amber has her I Am the Impact bracelet on from the Uprising. It's okay. It's okay. We know.
Somehow,
I don't need a sign, do I?
Well, thank you so much for being here, for everything that you've invested in us. We love you.
Oh, I'm so excited for April.
Yeah.
20
We are
of
too.
you. 20.
Now we could find one of those small buses to put 20 people on. It would be really much more comfortable than 2 15-passenger vans.
The short bus?
Yeah. Thanks.
Always wanted to ride the short bus too. They give you something.
I don't know. You can step in the short bus, people start
I was
talking.
going to ask you to come up here. I don't know. Come up here a second. Amber's going to come up now. Yeah. They're all coming because I didn't invite them up. But you might be next. You might be next. I want you to share about your bracelet story from the trip.
Oh, okay. Okay, going to, where do we go? To Minneapolis. You don't put me on the spot. I'm like, you could have told me this.
She's not moving.
We went to Minneapolis, and on our way back home, we were on a plane with this lady, I forgot her name. Sheila, great job. You have such great memory. Sheila. First, she offered me an amazing seat where I can just kick my legs out because I was like this.
She was the flight attendant.
Right, she was the flight attendant. I was sitting beside these two people and I was very tight. But she gave me a seat where I can relax. And then she's sitting right across from me. And she keeps looking at my bracelet the whole plane ride. And she asked me, well, first she started people just grab my arm and just start doing this number without asking. I'm glad that I don't have any issues with that. But she's trying to read my bracelet and she's asking about my Dre beats. That's how the conversation actually started. And then when we're sitting there about to get off the plane, she said something else about my bracelet. I was like, how about I just give it to you? Because she just kept asking and she's interested. She's asking about the impact and she's telling me that she could tell that I'm special and that I make an impact and all this stuff. And then she said something about her grandson. And I was like, well, look, I'm going to give you this one. I'm sure that I can find another one because I thought I had another one at the house, but I think I gave it to somebody else prior. But thankfully, Reba gave me one like a day later, so I didn't go long without my impact bracelet. But just something like this, this gets a lot of attention. If y'all aren't wearing these and you have them, it gets a lot of attention everywhere I go. But I was just excited that day to have that conversation triggered by a bracelet and her just speaking of how she would love for her grandson to be that type of impact.
There was also a guy sitting beside you that you
right.
talked to.
There was he was going off overseas somewhere to do service. He couldn't tell me where he was going, but he said that he was going to be 12 hours into the future. So he was going through many time zone changes. And he was, I could tell that he wasn't at ease at all. He was very uncertain and seemed kind of fearful. He was saying that he's been to, I think he said he went to Iraq and it was kind of chilled and relaxed, but where he was going is just not that chilled and it's not fun. And I was worried for him because he just didn't have any type of peace with the situation. So I've actually been praying for him all along. And he said he was going to be gone until February, I think. So he's gone for a while.
And Amber and Sheila were able to tell him that they would be left just over and over. And then there were people who would come in and say, does the Bible really say this? Or does the Bible say that? Or where in the world is this found in the Bible? Because this person keeps telling me this is in the Bible, and where is it? And sometimes I say, that's not in the Bible. Don't believe that. Cleanliness is next to godliness is not in the Bible. I don't care what your granny told you. It's not there. So in my top drawer at work, I had a Bible, so I could pull it out when I needed to, and I had a dictionary. Because the second most question I ever got asked was, how do you spell this word? And you know, this was before. Well, on our job we had access to the internet, but we weren't allowed to do anything except work on our computers. So and not everybody had. Well, I guess smartphones existed then. I'm not sure. Anyway, I know you don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, you know, they couldn't look them up themselves, and most of the time I could tell them how to spell the word, but if I couldn't, I would go to the dictionary. So in my top drawer I had a dictionary and a Bible, and those were my reference books. And I used them quite a bit. I mean, I used them for myself too, but I used them because people would come and ask me. Well, this morning we're going to look at scripture in 1 Peter chapter 1, where we find out that even though I didn't think about it, I actually was being biblical by keeping a Bible and a dictionary in my top drawer. Imagine that. 1 Peter chapter 1, if you have your Bible and want to turn there, or if you want to pull out your smartphone and go to your YouVersion app or your Blue Bible app or whatever you read the Bible on, I really encourage you to do that. We're going to look in 1 Peter, the first chapter, starting with the 12th verse. I know y'all are hungry, and you don't want me to stand up here and talk a long time. So I apologize ahead of time. I'm sorry, not chapter 1, it's chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 12. I hear the whispering. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12. For the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears attend to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled, but sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. And keep a good conscience, so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. Well, that was really wordy, but I want you to hear this. So we're going to look through what Peter is saying, and remind you again, this is Peter writing, the apostle, Jesus' disciple. Remember, the loudmouth, abrasive disciple. The one who always had something to say, who was always the first to jump into a situation. You know him? Oh, and no, don't point at him if he's here. The one who is always ready, the first to jump, the first one to answer, the first one to the know-it-all. This is Peter who's writing. So I want us to look through the things that he says, because what he is saying is that we need to, when people come into your office or come into your life or approach you in whatever way, when they come to you with a question, you should be ready to answer. You should be ready to give them an answer to the question that they ask you. Specifically, Peter is talking about how we share our Jesus story, what Jesus has done for us, how Jesus has transformed our life. As Lisa said this morning, her life has been transformed. We're ready, as Amber was able to do on the plane with Sheila and with the guy that was sitting in the seat next to her, ready to have an answer for the hope that is in you. And sometimes it really helps for you to make the first step. I mean, the first step was wearing the bracelet, not being ashamed to be who you are. I'm going to be me. I'm going to live my life. Jesus lives in me. I'm going to let him shine in the way that he created me, in the gifts that he gave me, the abilities that he's put in my life. I'm going to let Jesus shine through those so that people will have a question. Have you experienced that? Has anybody ever asked you? Maybe it was through a difficult time. Maybe you were going through a hard time and somebody wanted to know, how in the world did you get through that? What got you through the difficult time? Or how did you survive going through the pain that you endured? Or maybe it's something great. Maybe your talent shines so bright that people want to say, how did you get so good at what you do? How in the world are you able to do this? So you should be ready, as a believer in Christ, you should be ready at all times to give an answer for that. And that's what Peter is talking about in this verse. He says, well, let's go back and see, since that's the subject. In verse 13, he says, who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? In other words, he's saying, what's it going to hurt for you to do good? What's it going to hurt for you to put out the first effort? What's it going to hurt for you to wear the bracelet, or for you to wear the I love my church shirt, or just live a life that is an example of what a believer is? How is that going to hurt you? He said, who can hurt you because you do that? But even if you do, he's saying, if you go back and read the Greek context, he's saying it's not likely that this is going to come up, but just in case it ever did, that somebody came up to you and what you intend as good, they come up against you and slander you because of it. Even if they do that, you should rejoice in it. You should find joy in it. Okay, that's easy, right? When somebody comes up and puts you down for something that you believe, or for something that you do, for your belief in Christ, it's easy just to rejoice in them putting you down, right? Not so much easy. But that's what Peter says. He says you should find that. In other words, you should plan for it when it happens. And when it happens, then that's a reason for you to rejoice. Why would we rejoice in it? Why? would we rejoice in it? Sound like Bugs Bunny. Why would we rejoice? That wasn't Bugs Bunny, was it? That was Elmer Fudd. Somebody. Anyway, we rejoice in it because it's working. Because Jesus is getting through. People are not just seeing me, they're seeing him. And that's my whole goal in life, is being a follower of Jesus is for somebody else to follow him too. So I want them to see him, not just to see me. So I have a reason to rejoice. Even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you're blessed and you should rejoice. So he says, here's the first thing here's the first step. Do not fear them. Don't be afraid of them. Do not be afraid of their intimidation. Do you find people that don't agree with you when you talk about Jesus? Do you find them intimidating? Or do they find you intimidating? Okay, it didn't say intimidate them. It said don't be intimidated by them. I think it's probably easy for us if we're not sure. If we're not sure of the hope that we have. If we're not sure of our relationship, if we haven't settled the issue of who Jesus is in our life, I think it's easy for us to be intimidated. But if Jesus has done anything for you, if he has been faithful to you, if he's answered a prayer, if he's been there in your hard time, if he's healed you when you were sick, or if he's provided for you when there was absolutely no way for you to be provided for, you couldn't do it yourself, but God did it. If he's ever done that and proven himself faithful, then it should be a sure thing for you to be able to say to somebody else, if he did it for me, he can do it for you. It's not something I'm going to be intimidated by. You know, even for myself, when I face the same situation again, I'm not going to let the situation intimidate me because Jesus took care of it the first time. He'll take care of it the next time. It just made me think. Yesterday I was able to perform a wedding ceremony for some friends, and it was a beautiful service, and I love being there. But they were sharing with me a few weeks ago part of their story, and he was telling me about his life when he was single. Before they met, before they were married, he said that he wanted to be married so badly. He didn't like being single. He didn't like being lonely. All of his friends were getting married. He was getting older. He's like in his late 30s. And he was getting older and single and didn't want to be lonely. And, you know, he would hang out with friends. And then at the end of the day, they'd go home to their families. And he would go home to his empty apartment. And he said, and I didn't even know what to do to fix that. Because, you know, he had dated a few girls, but, you know, nobody that he really felt like was who he was supposed to be with. So they came and went. And then he said, in his situation, there wasn't anything that he knew he could do to get himself from where he was to where he wanted to be. So he considers what God did for him by bringing Catherine into his life to be nothing but a miracle. That it was a miracle that she came, that they met the way they did, that they fell in love, that he's in Michigan, she's in South Carolina. Their very first date, she was on a business trip teaching in Toronto, and he decided he would fly to Toronto and meet her. And their very first date was in a coffee shop in Toronto. They had met, they had talked online, and they had talked on the phone, they Skyped, but they had never seen each other in person until they met in Toronto. So the way all of that worked, where he was at one time was what he considered hopeless. He considered his life hopeless, that he would never be anything but who he was. Yet, at the same time, God was working in a way that he couldn't see to change his life. And today he's married and on his honeymoon, which is awesome. I'm so happy for them. But I want to encourage you not to let... for instance, in their case, he could let another single person who's in the shoes that he was in come and with their own story and their own pain, and he could be intimidated by that and say, "Oh, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to tell them how good marriage is," because they don't want to hear how good marriage is because they're single and they just don't want to hear about this. But that's not that's not the way to get a person from where they are to where they want to be. Now, I'm not talking about people who are single and want to stay single. That's their issue. I mean, that's their privilege. Did I say issue?
Yeah, you did.
I didn't mean issue. Oh, we all got issues. Come on. Jesus. Being single is not an issue. Being single for people who like to be single is just fine, and I'm happy for them. It's a gift, just like being married is a gift. You can be given either one. It is. Anyway, let's move on. The way to help a person who is where you've been is by you sharing where you are now with them. So, don't be intimidated by them. Don't fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled. Don't be anxious. Okay, if we're going to share a Jesus story, don't sit around saying, well, I wonder if anybody's going to listen to me. I wonder if anybody's going to believe it. Until your fingers down to it. No, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be full of faith. We're people of power. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love and of power and a sound mind. So we, ahead of time, are planning with anticipation the time that we get to share with that next person what Jesus has done in our life. So we're not intimidated and we're not anxious, but he says, this is a really strange verse. He says, but sanctify Christ. Sanctify Christ. Sanctify Christ. Okay. But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts. So let's just make this in English, okay? So we don't always use the word sanctify every day, probably. Anybody use the word sanctify yet today? Did you? Can you use it in a sentence? I know. If it's a holy word, right? Sanctify. Well, it is. The word sanctify literally means set apart. So when God sanctifies us, he sets us apart. What he does is he moves us from where we were into his family. He sets us to be a part of his family. We're sanctified, which is where the word saint comes from. So people who are set apart are saints. People who are sanctified are saints. You don't have to be canonized and do 15 miracles and have seen a picture of Jesus somewhere. That's not what a saint is. You become a saint when Jesus says, I sanctify you and put you in my family. So you're a saint, okay? We're a room full of saints, right? So when we sanctify Jesus in our heart, what Peter is telling us is you need to set him here. You need to establish him. You need to establish in your heart that Jesus is Lord. That's what he says. Sanctify Christ in your heart as Lord. So, this is kind of the most important part of the whole step. Because if you don't have a Jesus story, you can't share a Jesus story. If he hasn't become the Lord of your life, then you don't really have any hope to share with people. You don't have the hope of the world. You don't have what will really solve their issues, not their singleness, their issues. You don't have the hope that they are looking for if you don't have a Jesus story. So first of all, the most important thing you need to do is this step. Sanctify Jesus in your heart as Lord. What does that mean? Well, that means that you recognize that he who is who he says he is, and that you are who he says you are. Jesus, the Son of God, who loved you enough to create you. He created you to love you. And when he created you, he had a plan for you. And his plan was that one day you would hear the good news that he loved you. That's pretty simple, right? Pretty simple. He loved you all along, but you didn't even know it. Remember last week we read the verse that says, though you haven't seen him yet, you love him. You haven't met him face to face, but your heart still cries out for him. We have this longing to know God, but we haven't met him yet until we hear the story that he loves us. And for some of us, we heard it in Sunday school when we were 3 years old, and for some of us, we were 40 before we knew about it, and some of us were different ages. But at some point, we hear the good news that Jesus loves you. that Jesus has a plan for you and that he wants to work in your life. Michael just moved. Just up and gone. Just gone. No notice, no come help me pack, nothing. Just, Michael, God has a plan in that. I believe, and I think you know it, I believe that God has a plan in that. That what you're doing with your life, that you're following God's plan for you. And it's not, I'm not trying to be a prophet. I don't consider myself a prophet. But I believe that God leads us in where when we listen to his voice, when we follow what we feel him leading us to do, is a means that we have of doing this, of sanctifying Christ in our heart as Lord. It's not just the act of saying, Jesus, I accept you as my Savior, and I want you to forgive my sins and bring me into your kingdom. But it's an everyday act of saying, Jesus, you're Lord of this day. I'm going to listen to your voice today, and you're the Lord of my decision that I'm making today. If I feel like the Lord is calling me to pack up and move somewhere else, and he has in the past, then that's what I'll do. I'm praying he never tells me that again. I don't like U-Hauls. You don't like U-Hauls anymore either. I hate moving trucks. I hate packing boxes. I hope I've done it. No, I want to move one more time because I really want to live downtown Greenville. But once I get here, then I'll be done. But that's part of sanctifying him as Lord. It's making him the Lord of every day of my life. Today, Jesus, you're the Lord of my life. Today, I believe you're going to give me an opportunity to share with somebody how much you mean to me. So you're the Lord of this day. You lead me in the conversations. You lead me in the direction of my life. You give me my life direction. You're the Lord of it. You're in charge. That's what Lord means, right? If someone is your Lord, you're their servant. So he's the Lord. He's in charge. He gets to tell us what we're doing. And his blessing is on it. It's so obvious and it's so freeing for him to be the Lord of our life. Because that takes the pressure off of me. I don't have to do it. I don't have to do it. He does it. So, we're sanctifying Christ as the Lord of our hearts. Well, let me just ask you now, since we're here, if you've done that, have you made him the Lord of your life? Is that where you are? Have you set him up and you said, Jesus, I'm yours. I belong to you. I accept the gift of salvation that you offer me, and I receive the free gift of grace so that my life is free. I'm tired of dragging this heavy burden of having to be good and having to look apart. I'm ready to give all that up and stand in your righteousness and let you live in me. Because today is a really good day to do that if you haven't done that yet. Today is a great day to do that. Because right now in this room, if you haven't done it, you're surrounded by a bunch of people who have, and maybe some others who haven't, but you're surrounded by people who understand what it means to live a life of freedom. It's not coming, when I say he's the Lord and I'm the servant, that doesn't mean that he stands over me with a whip and says, do this and do that and do this. That's not the kind of Lord he is. The kind of Lord he is that he walks with me through every step of my day, and he gives me strength to get through it. He gives me joy in the midst of things that aren't joyful. That's the kind of Lord I want to have. I don't want to have the kind of Lord that makes my life a drudgery. I want the kind of Lord that gives me joy in the middle of the life that's already full of mess. The best part of it is that the burden of sin that I carry, the weight and the guilt and the shame that I carry, he removes all that. He takes it off and he welcomes me into a life of eternity with him. He says, I want you to live forever. I don't want you to perish. I don't want you to die. I want you to live forever. Even when this life ends, you're going to keep living and you can live in eternity with him. That's the good news of accepting him and of sanctifying him as Lord of our lives. That every day we get to walk in that joyful existence with him. Step by step, listening to his voice and obeying. Listening to him and letting him. It's so easy. I remember I used to have a Sunday school teacher who would talk to us about the grace of God. And And she would say, you know, it's really not that hard. It's just, grace just means that God is carrying you. And she would say, it's like putting a kitten in a basket and carrying it across the field. And she would do this. That's what grace is. God puts you in a basket like a kitten and he carries you across. It's just, that's pretty simple, but that's what it is. It's not my striving. It's not my hard working, but it is his grace at work in my life that accomplishes anything. It's Jesus working in me. I don't know if you can tell this, but I love that Jesus is Lord of my life. I love that I have a relationship with him where every single day I can talk to him and bring him troubles and bring him joys. And it's not a broken relationship. It's not one that I don't go to him in fear. I don't have to grovel. I come to him with my arms stretched open wide because he's ready to receive me just like that. He stands with his arms open wide toward us as we approach him, and we come to him with full assurance that when we come to him, Jesus said this, whoever comes to me, I will never turn away. So I want you to think about this today. If you haven't made that decision yet, today's a really good day to do that. If you don't feel like you're ready today to do that, then I want this to be in your mind and your heart, that it doesn't matter when. Whenever you get to the point, the Holy Spirit draws you and you feel like today is the day I'm going to make this decision, Jesus is still going to be standing there with his arms open wide. I used to hear, when I was a little kid, I remember going to church and I would hear the preacher preach, if you don't decide tonight, you might get in a train wreck on the way home. The train's going to hit your car on the way home, you're going to die, and you're going to go to hell. That didn't convince me to do anything. That didn't convince me to make Jesus Lord of my life. It scared me to death, but it didn't build my relationship with Jesus. I want you to hear today that Jesus wants you, that he wants a relationship with you because he loves you so much. So, if today is the day, then we're all going to rejoice with you. And we're gonna have lunch. We're gonna have a party, just like the party they have in heaven when somebody makes that decision. It's gonna be glorious when Jesus does a work in our life. So I'm just gonna ask you right now: is there anybody in here in the room because we're not ashamed, we're not intimidated, we're not anxious, we're not chewing our nails off, we love Jesus? Is there anybody in the room this morning who wants to say to Jesus, Jesus, I want you to be Lord of my life. I've never done this before, but I want you to be Lord of my life today. Just stick your hand up. I mean, you stick your hand up for anything, just go ahead and stick your hand up for this. And we want to just rejoice with you this morning. Anybody at all? Going once? Listen, if there is a chance, because we want to talk to you after the service is over today, if this is something that you're thinking about, this burning in your heart, a decision that you want to consider, we want to talk to you about it. So after the service this morning, if you will talk to us, we want to do that. But when we have the story, I'm just going to assume that all of us have already done this. That we've all established Jesus, we've sanctified him in our heart as the Lord. And so he says when we do that, then the thing that you have to do is always be ready. You see the next line? It says, always be ready. Always have in your top drawer an answer. Always have in your top drawer an answer when somebody asks you the question. When somebody comes to you and wants to know about your faith, always be ready to make a defense to anyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you. Yet, with, what are the two words? When you give them an answer, do it with gentleness and reverence. Now, have you heard that yet today? It's what Amy said at the very beginning of the service. When you give them an answer, when you offer them the gift of grace that you've received, you don't go and say, I'm going to jerk that sin out of your life, you dirty, rotten sinner, you need to get saved. Turn or burn. If the child is holding the blade of the knife in their hand, you don't jerk the blade from their hand. You don't try to, you do it the way Peter says do it, with gentleness and with reverence. You gently go to them. You gently offer them the gift, because that's what Jesus did. That's the way Jesus treated us. That's the way he got us into the family. Now, that's, I know there are some people that are a little more rough in their style. Maybe they're a little more rough around the edges, and they have a different method of talking to people. And that's okay. I believe God uses our personalities. I think that's okay. But still, in the midst of that, if we do it with a gentle attitude, with a reverent attitude, that this is really important. This is an important decision that this person is making. This is some good news that they need to hear. Then it'll be much more effective than if we try to, stand on the street corner and point out every sin. I was at a pastor's lunch this past week. Yes, I ate a lot this week. I was at a lunch, and it was a prayer lunch because there's going to be the annual Hinge gathering, which is a prayer gathering. It's going to happen this year, next month in Falls Park on the Shakespeare stage. It's usually at the amphitheater, but since that's gone, it's going to be at the Shakespeare stage. And that was one of the things that they were saying, how as we gather together, this believers from the city of Greenville gather to pray over our city and ask God to continue blessing the city and to increase his kingdom here, that we don't stand, we're not going to get up on the corner of the street somewhere and point out everybody's sin as they walk by, Which, I grew up in Greenville. I was born here. I've seen it all. There are street preachers, and God bless them if he called them to do that, then. But there are some who will stand on the street corner and point out, your skirt's too short, or your hair's too long, or, crazy stuff. It's happened. That's not what we're about. What we are about is telling people about Jesus. We're not pointing out sin, we're pointing out Jesus. We know about our sin. We're well aware that we are in need of a Savior. So we have to point out that there is a Savior who wants to change lives. Because it's the most important decision that person will make in their life. So, always ready to give an account for the hope that's in us with gentleness and reverence, and keeping a good conscience, so that in the thing that you're slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will not even have anything to hang their hat on. They can't even say anything against you, because your life really lives out a picture of Jesus. When they look at you, they see him. When they look at your life, they see Jesus shining through you. When they see your good works. That's what Jesus said. He said they will see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. They'll see the way you live your life, the example that you set for them. That in the work of your hands, you're diligent, you're hardworking, you're not lazy at it. You're a good employee, you're a good spouse, a good parent, a good friend. That everything that you set your hand to do shows a picture of Jesus in all his glory, so that they find him irresistible. The world will see him and want to know him the way you know him when you show them a clear picture of who he is. They will want him. So, in our Jesus story, shining our Jesus story for everybody to see, why does it matter? Why do we need to be ready? Why is it important for us? It's really simple. Because it doesn't matter who you talk to, if they're 5 years old or 105 years old. They're looking for hope. If they haven't found it yet, after 105 years, it's not too late. And 5 years old is not too early. I needed hope when I was 5. I want to show you a video this morning of how a person who was ready to give an answer impacted the life of a 5-year-old.
Join me in showing some big love all the way from Kenya, Jimmy Wambua. Jimmy, we've gotten to spend some time together over the last couple days, and I want you to share a bit of your story with these folks right now.
My name is Jimmy Wambua, and I grew up in a slum in Kenya. When I was 4 years old, my mother fell sick. I never knew my dad. And so she was confined to bed most of the day, and she could not go to the market and find food for us. Faced with starvation, I opted to go to the streets. And many other days I would wake up very early in the morning just to make it in time before the rest of the scavengers come. I roamed the streets hoping that somebody will hold my hand and release me from this situation. When I was 7 years old, I watched as my 10-month-old little sister died of starvation in the lap of my mother. The situation was becoming worse. And my mother, looking at the situation, she decided to donate us to relatives and go look for help. And so I was given up to a sister. And the situation was not any better because I was like the 8th child to join the table. I didn't know what will happen to me next. And that was my early childhood between the ages of 4 and 7.
So Jimmy, your mother goes away just to try to find help. So now your father, your mother not in the picture. Your situation is still very, very dire. But at the age of 8, something dramatic happened in your life. Share that with us.
That was the April of 1990. And my mother came back. And that night she said to me, Jimmy, God loves you so much. I found some help somewhere. And tonight we shall be traveling 220 miles away from here in the direction of that hope. I remember when she came with new clothes for me, and as she was giving me a bath, she sobbed looking at how the poor health had ravaged my health. And so we got to this train, and for 12 hours we drove in the direction of that hope. And by the morning, we were at this compassion project in partnership with the local Baptist church. And that's where I got registered as a little boy. And 4 months later, I received a letter, and please allow me to read it to you, because this defined the rest of my life, that who I am today. This letter is 19 years old and says, Hello, Jimmy. My name is Mark, and I'm 20 years old. I'm glad to have the opportunity to have a friend in Kenya. I don't know anyone outside of Canada. The reason I'm writing to you is because of a really important friend we have. You see, when I was younger, I didn't really know about Jesus, who he was. But last year, some people taught me about a great friend named Jesus. My life has changed. I really love this world and the people within it, all because of God's love for me and you and everyone. So even though you are halfway through the world, I know that God loves you and cares for you. He mapped my whole vision for life. He mapped my whole vision for life in these few words, because from then, my life is a different life. I'm at Moody Bible Institute right now, studying the Bible, to go back to Kenya and stand in the gap, in the same way Mark Hells from Canada stood in the gap for me. My mother died 6 years later after the sponsorship. It is the same time I got saved and knew what my sponsor meant when he said he's a real good friend in Jesus Christ. Right now, I'm sponsoring a kid in Haiti. She's 4 years old. That's the time that I was intervened at. And I think that's the time that I need to intervene to a child and change the whole course of their life. I am so grateful that Compassion, and through the ministry that they have across the world, has changed my life and who I am. I'm ready to stand in the gap for many others who just need somebody to stand in the gap for them.
Isn't that great? Here's a young man whose life was changed by the love of Christ being put in action through a young 20-year-old, and now he's standing in the gap and helping others. One question, have you ever talked to your sponsor?
No,
You have not?
no.
Well, would you like to meet him right now? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mark Hales, Jimmy's sponsor. You guys all right? I'm gonna try to talk. Jimmy is so touched right now. Mark, here, let's just turn this way real quick, guys. Mark, first of all, thanks for coming. And Mark, I have to ask you right now, all these years of supporting Jimmy, what does this moment mean to you?
I am absolutely in awe of God and of this fellow right here and what he has gone through.
Here you go, Jimmy. Well, obviously, folks, this is a very emotional moment, so we didn't script for me falling apart.
Jimmy's English is much better than when he started in his letters to me.
Yeah. So Mark, I do want to ask you this in this terrifically emotional moment. What has God done to you? We know what he's done through you. It's evidenced right here. But just share with these people, this is not just $38 a month that you invested for many, many years. What has God taught you through this experience?
Just to be compassionate to those that need it.